Today, we're going to be talking about hypocrisy at DC, but not in the way that you're maybe used to hearing me talk about it. In case you've been living under a rock, which would be weird because most of the big rocks actually are in Utah, Charlie Kirk was a man who got paid to tell you why you should agree with him politically, who then stopped telling people that quite suddenly. Now, that's pretty much all I'm going to say on the topic for this video at the very least. There's been a lot of conversation about it politically because this person was a political influencer, a propagandist, you might even say. Well, a author of a Red Hood comic made an offhanded joke, two of them, I think, technically, about this individual, and that caused them to be fired and their Red Hood comic to be canceled. And then DC came out with this corpo spiel saying that they want to talk about peace and they're not about violence and blah, blah, blah. But here's the thing. That's total bullshit. Something I find really funny about Warner Brothers and DC as a corporation pretending to be offended by the idea of violence is that they just released a Superman movie where Superman kills his own clone and where Hawkgirl kills someone she doesn't like for political reasons. I did a whole video on it. It looks like this. It's on my channel. It's not that many videos ago. On top of that, this author was hired to write a Red Hood comic with Huntress, two DC characters known for their use of lethal force. In fact, the inclusion of the Red Hood in the Arkham games, Arkham Knight specifically, is what first boosted it to that M rating over teen. This isn't anything new. And if we're pretending that a few offensive jokes is enough to fire someone and not rehire them, then I don't understand how James Gunn has his job at DC at all. The truth is that because he made Marvel money, DC and Warner Brothers were willing to overlook anything he said, and he said a lot about 9/11, about Muslims, about being trans, about being gay. They were willing to overlook all of that because they thought he would make Marvel money for them. And of course, he hasn't since, but they were hoping that he would. And I think even more offensive than pretending that this person's comments about Charlie Kirk were the straw that broke the camel's back after hiring James Gunn back and turning him into the president of DC Studios alongside Peter Safran, who produced a bunch of parody movies which made horribly offensive jokes in them. That was their whole bread and butter back then in the 2000s to 2010s, was offensive, edgy parody, is the fact that Tom King, who bragged about torturing people in the Middle East following 9/11 as a CIA operative, here's a clip of him doing it at a Google event to Frank Miller, telling him about it, bam.
Is like it helps writing about getting shot at if you've been shot at, but I think that's kind of BS. I probably just say that. It doesn't help at all.
It does sound cool.
Yeah, no, because if I wrote, it stinks because you can't write realistic. Like Batman's famous thing, Frank, you did this better than anyone, is to when he's interrogating someone, is to dangle them off a building.
Yeah.
And then open his hands up and like ah,
yeah.
and then they just start confessing. That doesn't actually work.
Before I even went to the farm, I was like, I worked on the Iraq War when it was just sort of, when they were planning it, when they were sort of planning the invasion. I decided, I've never been good at sleeping, so I was like, I'll work the night shift. So I'd work the night shift. I'd work overnight in CIA, and it was really like a skeleton crew. It was like two of us and another guy and another older person. And if the older person didn't show up, and he was not the most reliable person, he was kind of an old drunk, it would be me. It'd be I was 22 at the time, in charge of the fucking Iraq invasion.
This guy not only continues to get work at DC, writing comics, but has been one of the co-architects for DCU and the DC Studios brand, with James Gunn constantly saying that elements like the hypno glasses and all that are mentioned in the Superman movie came from Tom King. James Gunn would be like, hey, I want to do something here. What are the ways the comics have done it? He'll either pick a choice that pre-exists and riff on that or make something up new. I'm not offended by this sort of, play it like jazz methodology for writing your new canon. I'm a little bit more offended at the fact that his reboot is functionally not a reboot, and way more offended that he's doing it with a war criminal. Now, if they're willing to hire war criminals and guys with the most offensive Twitter history in his 40s, and a book where he talks about wanting to molest children, and a blog he had where he was deeply homophobic with the guy from The Office, Rainn Wilson, who he also put in Super, that movie where he bragged about having 3 rape scenes and that they were with underage people and he found them romantic. If they're fine with those people working at DC, they should be fine with the trans author who made 2 tweets that half of the internet didn't like, a half an internet that's already calling in bomb threats. It's all very strange. And look, the parallels between political hatred and the whole DC fan, true DC fan, Snyder cultist, whatever, the parallels are unnerving. And I only really noticed the political stuff as I researched the comic book stuff. But it's not a conversation right now that we're having about whether or not it's okay to make a comment about a public figure or a public event like this. The conversation isn't around how you should vote. The conversation isn't even around what movies you're allowed to watch or what comics are good. It's about the fact that Warner Brothers is a hypocritical corporation that is fine with violence in certain ways and not in others. So the next time they roll out those special Pride covers, realize that they're fleecing you for money and they don't care about you as a demographic, because if you're gay, bi, or trans, or anything other than a straight white man, and you make a joke that the internet finds offensive, you're gone and you can't come back. But if you're a literal war criminal and you brag about it in public, you can continue as a tenured element of comic and film, and that's just fine. That's the problem today. The hypocrisy, the claim of nonviolence from a corporation, which I have covered ad nauseum in my first 2 books, and again in the third one that I'm working on, about how they have been abusive, about how they tried to screw Siegel and Schuster out of the rights to both Superman and Superboy and hoped that they would die in World War II so they wouldn't have to pay a fair wage to them, and then blackballed them in the industry for daring to stand up for their own creator rights. What they did to Richard Donner and Christopher Reeve, what they did to Tim Burton, what they even did to Joel Schumacher, what they did to the Batgirl movie, and what they're going to continue doing. They're going to be hypocritical, money-grabbing assholes, because a corporation is never your friend. Trying to be friends with a corporation is like trying to be friends with a schizophrenic who will refuse to take their meds for the rest of their lives. The decision-making behind everything that you like about them can change rapidly and without warning, because now a different personality is in control of what happens. That's what happens within a corporate structure. They are not your friend. They are greedy bastards, all trying to insulate themselves from blowback and trying to make as much money as possible. That's why Zaslav continues to have some of the highest bonuses in all of Hollywood while producing some of the greatest flops in superhero and cinematic history. So if you're fine with a violent comic book about the Red Hood, and you're fine with James Gunn's Twitter history, and you're fine with Tom King torturing innocents in the Middle East, you probably shouldn't have an issue with a comic author making 2 tweets. Am I condoning it? No. Am I disciplining it? No. I'm calling out the hypocrisy of a corporation that pretends to be your friend to fleece money off of you by making special covers for demographics that they only care about when they think it will make them profitable. A corporation will never be your friend. Ask anyone they screwed over, like Tom Welling or the Beast Boy voice actor, or Kevin Conroy, who accidentally leaked the Arkham Knight when someone asked him about Arkham Origins, and he was replaced in almost all DC media at the time, and Warner Brothers tried to ban him from fan events like Comic-Cons. These people aren't your friends. They just own the rights to your favorite characters.